It's funny that long after The Flash ended, the one topic that seems to incite fan engagement is the topic of Iris West. Say what you want about her, she's certainly a character who left an impression, and most of us would agree it was more negative than positive. But why is that anyway? Perhaps there are other reasons out there that I have yet to see, but for the most part, the source of all this Iris West vitriol stems from her relationship with our main character Barry Allen. A lot of people just didn't like them together. I have no idea what clickbait I will use to try and get people to click on this video. Maybe I'll say something like Iris West is a better love interest than someone popular like Mary Jane, although then again that may actually get people who actually agree with that statement given the current state of Spider-Man comics. Either way, the actual topic of this video is a defense of Iris West as a love interest. Of course, before we can do any defending, we first need to get a general idea of some of the criticisms levied against Iris. A lot of people found her to be grating and extremely insufferable. One of the earliest examples of this was her reaction to learning that Barry Allen was the Flash, as believe it or not, she's the only character we see who actually gets mad at Barry after learning his secret, except for Ralph Dibny, though that scene is played off as a joke, so one can't really count it. And something like that isn't insignificant, as the audience likes and roots for Barry. He's our main character who we follow. The entire story is told from his perspective. We've laughed at his funny moments, felt embarrassed whenever he did something cringe, cried alongside him when he mourned his dead mother, and like any other protagonist, a lot of us see ourselves in him. This reaction kind of sets the tone for her character for the rest of the series. Whereas Barry's other potential love interests were always raising his spirits and were genuine sources of joy and entertainment for the audience whenever they were on screen, the appearance of Iris was often followed by an argument of some kind. When they eventually began dating, the audience naturally began to weigh their chemistry against what we'd seen before, as human beings are inherently creatures of comparison. It's in our nature, it's what makes us who we are. When we see two options, we immediately ask which is better, which path is safe, what meal is tastier, who is nicer, and TV show love interests are no exception. So it was always inevitable for people to realize that Barry's interactions with the multiple other single women in his life always seemed to be more enjoyable for himself and for the audience than the one woman who the story had chosen to pair him up with. You're probably thinking, I wouldn't make a very good lawyer, as so far all I've done is remind you why you hate Iris and wish Barry ended up with Caitlin Snow or Patty Spivot. There were actually several alternatives for Barry to choose, from Supergirl to Felicity Smoke to his first girlfriend Lena Park. I'm pretty sure I've even seen some people ship Barry with Jesse Quick, because why not? Anyone would be better than Iris, right? Well, let's do a thought experiment. A small what-if story where we make one small change to the story and see what the show would look like if that happened. Wind your clocks back to the 16th of May 2017, just 12 days short of the first anniversary of Harambe's death. Back then, the world had never known certain horrors like the pandemic or TikTok, and The Flash Season 3 Episode 22 was about to air, or it aired on that day, titled Infantino Street. Here's where we rewrite history and turn all the memes into reality. Savitar kills Iris West and all the people rejoiced now that peace was finally restored. How would this change affect the show? Now, of course, if the writers planned to kill Iris off, the TV show wouldn't have progressed as it did. I have a hard time seeing them making Barry propose to Iris just to kill her. And also, this is a CW TV show at the end of the day, so Barry has to date somebody, and the writers wouldn't waste their time developing a relationship they planned to end abruptly. I listed a bunch of alternatives for Barry, but if we're being honest with ourselves, there are really just two: Caitlin Snow and Patty Spivot, with Caitlin winning from overwhelming popularity, at least from what I can see in the fandom. So I will mainly use Caitlin for my what if, but I will also explain whatever changes I think would happen if they went with Patty instead. I don't see the Flash seasons 1 and 2 changing much, except for at the very end of season 2. It was then that Iris all of a sudden seemed to have fallen in love with Barry, despite only having eyes for Eddie up until now, except for a few exceptional moments like when he traveled back in time to stop the Wizard in season 1. I believe the exact same thing would happen with Caitlin, as by now Zoom's true identity had been revealed, thus Caitlin was once again newly single. In fact, if you remove her stint of dating Jay Garrick for a prolonged period, which is similar to Iris's fling with Scott Evans, if you truncate her period with Jay Garrick so that matches Iris's period with Scott Evans, then both Iris and Caitlin have similar relationships, as both their fiancés were recently dead by the time season 2 2 began, and the only thing we are changing is who Barry ends up with, not the storylines of each season. So realistically, the writers would just have Caitlin fall in love with Barry, but he is too distracted by the death of his dad, so after kissing her, he runs off to save his mom, creates Flashpoint. Alternatively, if you're on Team Patty instead, she simply wouldn't be written off the show and would continue dating Barry. Season 3 would be where the real changes begin. As I said earlier, I don't see the writers putting a lot of effort into developing a relationship with Barry and Iris if they knew that they were going to kill her off, so she probably would remain a relatively minor character who would still need to show up occasionally so that her death has emotional weight. The same storylines with Iris' father pursuing her passion as a reporter, especially after learning she is destined to die soon when the newspaper changes, should remain. By the way, obviously the name on the newspaper wouldn't say Iris West Allen, to just say Iris West, or alternatively, maybe it can say Iris West Allen, but the name changes like it did in season 3 to show that the future has changed. Maybe the pivot to changing Barry's love interest wasn't something that was always planned, but simply a change made by the showrunners after they saw how well the audience responded to the natural chemistry between Barry and Caitlin, or Pat, in comparison to Barry and Iris, so they scrapped the original storylines in favor of new ones. Either way, during the events of this season, Barry and Caitlin start to date. Now in the case of Patty specifically, I do think that just like the writers struggled to come up with storylines for Iris during the season outside of her relationship and her looming death, something similar is likely to happen for Patty. After all, the other main police officer we follow is Joe West, and outside of season 1 where he was investigating Harrison Wells, he really doesn't get a lot of seasonal arcs, does he? And it makes sense as he isn't that important of a character, but to me it also shows that the writers struggled to come up with storylines for people who are outside of Team Flash. If you're on Team Caitlin, this doesn't apply, as she definitely had an arc this season with her becoming Killer Frost. Obviously, if they truly meant to have them wind up together, she wouldn't be written to have anything to do with Iris' death. Instead, she would probably turn on Savitar earlier and would be the reason for his defeat, as remember in this version, he got what he actually wanted, so they'd have to defeat him another way rather than rely on him getting erased from existence because Iris survived. They would all mourn Iris just like they did HR in the actual show, but they would also move on pretty quickly just like they did with HR in the actual show, and the season would end with Barry going to the Speed Force. So far, I think I'm being incredibly fair and realistic, but if you can't tell where I'm going with this, then let me jump to season 4. Caitlin would begin the season having reverted from Killer Frost to the Incredible Hulk, just like she does in the actual show. Cisco wouldn't have to recruit her to help rescue Barry, as she was a member of Team Flash from the beginning. In fact, she would now be the team leader, and the same thing goes for Patty. If you think it doesn't make sense for someone who was a criminal last season or a police officer with no scientific background to be the leader of a team of scientists, then the answer is for the same reason Iris West became the leader of Team Flash when she was just a reporter. Remember, the only change is who Barry is dating, not the writers who write the show. Do note that when the writers had Iris say lines like, "You are not the Flash Barry we are," they didn't do it with the express purpose of trying to get the audience to dislike her. Quite the opposite, they were trying to develop the love story in a way that they felt was both natural and endearing. After all, these are the same writers who had them get married in episode 8 after just a year of dating, so obviously they felt that this was a reasonable progression for their relationship. So similarly, the season would begin with the new team leader opposing Barry's rescue from the Speed Force under the admittedly fair logic that it risks destroying the city. Then in the next episode, Caitlin would tell Barry that he's not the Flash they are and ask him to go to couples counseling to explain why he chose to sacrifice himself to the Speed Force, leaving her alone without consulting her. I don't think they'd get married so soon after Iris' death, so instead Crisis on Earth X would be centered around Oliver and Felicity's marriage. After all, they did end up getting married at the end of the crossover, and that episode would feature the debut of Nora Snow Allen or Nora Spivot Allen, depending on which you prefer, and probably would have her get recast as both her parents are white this time. Episode 16 would be titled either Run Caitlin Run or Run Patty Run, with the exact same plot as the original because why not? And as for the rest of the cast, Joe would probably still be grieving Iris, and this would actually give a better reason for why Wally leaves the show. But other than that, the season remains the same as the original with the same cliffhanger ending, which is Nora's arrival. And I think by now you can tell what I'm getting at, but let's do one more season. Season 5 would begin with Nora having the same issues she did with her mother because because whoever her mother is put a meta-dampening chip inside her all her life after Barry disappeared in Crisis. Remember, I'm mainly focusing on Caitlyn, so I don't have to keep moving up and down. So throughout the season, Nora does everything exactly the same as in the original, as she and Caitlyn slowly heal their relationship, all while Sherlock investigates her. Or Sherlock. It all culminates in her being sent back to the future by her father, and Caitlyn immediately losing her shit at Barry for doing this, as she finally got to a good place with Nora. Remember that she too never had a good relationship with her own mother, just like Iris didn't, and as a substitute to Francine dying in season 2, her father Icicle died in the original season 5. So the two characters are relatively the same to each other, so that's why they can share storylines easily. And as such, her having a similar reaction to Iris would definitely be in character. This was an incredibly divisive moment for the audience, as a lot of people couldn't understand why Iris was forgetting the trauma Vaughn had put Barry through, and the obvious problem of allowing someone completely loyal to him to stay with them. And the story sides with Iris, implying that she was completely in the right and has her good the future to get Nora, and when she does, Barry pretty much concedes that he was being dumb and allows her to keep hanging out with them. And you already know how this works. Caitlyn would do the exact same thing in our rewrite. I also think this is the season Barry and Caitlyn would get married, as by now it's been 2 seasons after, instead of being the direct season after Iris's death, so you know that makes it okay. Don't believe me? Well, Felicity and Oliver got married in season 6 of Arrow, when Laurel died in season 4, so clearly the CW was like, after 2 seasons, the past. After that, the rest of the season proceeds exactly the same until, Nora gets herself erased. Nothing else would change. And I could keep doing this, but I think you already get the point. Some of the things people hate Iris for have absolutely nothing to do with her. After all, Iris isn't a real person. She's the product of bad writing, and replacing her with someone else wouldn't change their writing issues. Eric Wallace began his tenure on The Flash in season 4 before he was given full control in season 6, and it shows. This is the same season where Cecile got her powers after all. If you look at season 4, you can almost speak out what was written by Todd Helbing and what was written by Eric Wallace. This is why I think people are needlessly unfair to Iris, because even if you replaced her with whatever woman you think would be a far superior choice, a good chunk of the things you hate about Iris would be transferred to the new girl. And in fact, the audience's reaction would be worse, because anytime the new girl does something detestable, there would be a new line of argument that people can't use in our real world. And the line of argument would be as follows: the new girl isn't even supposed to be with Barry, and the show isn't comic book accurate anymore. Don't believe me? Well, that's literally what happened in the real world. The exact scenario I've been describing already took place, so I can already tell you where this path ends. After all, I am sure a lot of you will argue that Iris and Barry had poor chemistry in comparison to other fanships, and that had nothing to do with the writers. So at the very least, if my what if scenario had taken place in the real world, we would have that one additional bonus. But like I said earlier, that would just result in the audience hating the show even more. The Flash's predecessor Arrow did the exact same thing a lot of Flash fans wanted the writers to do. When the show started, they planned to pair up the Green Arrow with his comic book accurate love interest, the Black Canary. But because fans thought that their relationship was lame and preferred Oliver's natural chemistry with Felicity Smoke, the writers capitulated the audience's demands, and at the end of season 2 made the pivot from Laurel to Felicity, exactly like our what if scenario. Season 3 was the proper genesis of Felicity's relationship, just like our what if scenario. And even though we are killing Iris a full season before Laurel was killed in order to follow the Flash's actual plot, in both scenarios the comic book accurate love interest was killed so that the main character could date someone else. And as the old saying goes, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Because at the end of the day, the Arrow writers who started the show were the same Arrow writers who ended the show, well, for the most part. And so the bad relationship writing skills they used when they tried to pair Oliver and Laurel were transferred to Oliver and Felicity. And likewise, I argue that the bad writing for Barry and Iris would be passed on to Barry and Caitlyn. You see, these days, half of the issues with the Arrow series are put squarely on Felicity's shoulders, even when half of them have absolutely nothing to do with her. For example, Damien Dark was a bad villain, and that has absolutely nothing to do with Felicity. But the blame for Arrow season 4 being bad is almost instinctively always pinned on Felicity. Do you know why that is? It's because she isn't the Green Arrow's comic book accurate love interest. If Barry and Caitlyn had become a thing, and the TV show continued with its declining quality, regardless of the excellent chemistry between Grant Gustin and Daniel Panabaker, every time something went went wrong, fans would instantly blame Caitlyn, because the section of the fanbase that cares about comic book accuracy will always eclipse the shippers, even though the shippers are always louder. When Arrow killed Laurel, it lost half its audience, and even though the show's quality improved, that half never came back. You all think that everyone would love the fact that Iris is dead, but comic fans who love the relationship, of which I have no doubt there are plenty, would make it their life's work to criticize the show because of it. Also, think about this. By the time we got to season 9 of The Flash, or even as early as season 7, who was the best main character on the show outside of Barry? It's subjective, but for me, it was Iris West, as she was the only character who it actually made sense for her to have as big a role as she did. All other characters, including Killer Frost and Caitlin Snow, who were separate characters at the time, all felt like they should have been written off the show. Now imagine a world where the main love interest couldn't even hide behind that excuse. You can argue that certain bad storylines would only ever be tied to Iris, like her being stuck in the mirror world for almost half a season with the plot not moving, but Caitlin had bad plot lines as well. Remember the trial of Killer Frost? Remember her meeting her dad? Remember Keon? But if I am right, and I know I am, does this mean that the fans of The Flash were always doomed to have to watch a bad relationship no matter what? That there was nothing that could have been done, nothing that could possibly change, and that people's frustrations are invalid? Of course not. The point of this video was to say that you don't hate Iris, not truly. What you hate is bad writing, and the writers are unknown entities, so you can't direct your vitriol towards them, whilst Iris, the character, is someone you can easily put on a thumbnail and direct all your frustrations towards. Every time you say that you wish Barry dated Kara or Felicity or Patty or Caitlin instead of Iris, what you're really saying is you wish Barry and Iris were written better, just like those other couples, because at the end of the day, chemistry is not a substitute for bad writing. And as for the chemistry problem, I am of the belief that chemistry can be created. Even if it wasn't there originally, it can be created. I think Barry and Iris in the later seasons of The Flash had excellent chemistry, which they obviously didn't have at the beginning of the show. Although, even that statement, I kind of contest it. I don't think that Barry and Iris' chemistry at the beginning of the show was even that bad. It's just that in comparison to everyone else, it was lackluster. But the point is, the best way to build chemistry is to literally hang out. And that's where I think the writers needed to change the script. If I asked you to tell me anything you remember from Barry and Linda's relationship or Barry and Patty's relationship, you'd have far fewer negative things to say, as there are simply far fewer negative experiences between them in comparison to Barry and Iris. And now obviously the main reason is because of their difference in screen time, but even if we only focus on the first 2 seasons, there's still a very glaring issue. The most memorable interactions between Barry and Linda outside of their breakup, which was literally centered around Iris, were their dates, as they should be. I still remember that scene where they eat peppers, and then later on Barry eats a ghost pepper as a show of love for Linda. That's a scene that made me smile at Barry's goofiness. And who can forget Barry and Patty's date where he was blind and she figured it out, at the end of their date? If that didn't make you smile as Cisco was helping Barry get through the date, then you just might not have a soul. And I ask you, why are there no scenes like that for Barry and Iris after the mid-season finale of the first season? For every scene like that between Barry and another girl, there should be 3 with Barry and Iris. In the first half of the first season, Barry and Iris actually did cool stuff, like going to the movies as Barry geeked out about the special effects and Iris laughed, or in that one double date where Barry and Iris went bowling and poor Linda and Eddie were both having a bad time. Maybe more of the former than the latter, but in general, scenes like that go a long way to endearing a love interest to the audience. And as it stands, honestly, those 2 scenes and the one scene where Ralph makes Barry run back in flip-flops from his vacation while carrying Iris because he accidentally set off an alarm when he tried to turn on Netflix are the only 3 scenes in a 9-season show where I can remember of Barry and Iris just hanging out, and that simply shouldn't be the case. And I'm not saying those are the only 3 scenes that exist. I'm sure someone can point out another scene, but the fact that I can't instantly think of them, I should be able to think of 10 instantly, because these are 9 seasons of the show, and this is the main couple, and they started dating at the end of season 2, or if we're being real generous, at the beginning of season 3. I shouldn't have to rack my brain to think of scenes of them just hanging out, And if we could remove half of the unnecessary arguments they had and replace them with stuff like that, Barry and Iris would be one of the more beloved comic book pairings of all time. I mean, just look at Peter and MJ in the Raimi trilogy and Peter and Gwen in the Web duology. I only remember 2 arguments from the latter. The first being about Peter not wanting to date Gwen because her father made him promise to keep her her out of it, and the second being when Gwen wanted to help defeat both Lizard and Electro, which admittedly are two separate arguments. I'll concede to that, so I should have said 3, but they're about the same thing, so does it really count? In opposition, I can think of 5 arguments between Peter and MJ off the top of my head, and I could probably make the list reach 10 if I actually rewatch the trilogy. And I'm not saying that the couple should never argue, but as a writer, it's your responsibility to mitigate the negative with even more positives, and that's something Sam Raimi tried to do, but not enough. That's why you will never hear people saying Peter and MJ had no chemistry. They'll just say that Peter and Gwen had better chemistry, because we all remember scenes like the upside down kiss and that whole thing at the end of season 2 of Spider-Man 2, sorry. The Flash should have really benefited from stuff like that. If I've convinced you to hate Iris just 1% less, then toss me a subscription for that amazing feat. I am desperately trying to reach 500 subscribers, and I am so close yet so very, very far. Subscribe and like the video, join the battle against the YouTube algorithm, because it is a battle and I mean to win it by any means necessary. Until then, hail and farewell.